Hello, friends, and welcome. On behalf of all of our good friends at Eckhart Teachings, I want to welcome you to this special live session on awakening presence in times of adversity with Eckhart Tolle. My name's Tammy Simon. I'm the founder of Sounds True, and it's a true honor to be here with you for this live session. I also want to mention that this webinar is part of a larger exploration that you're invited to join. It's an upcoming 8-week online series with Eckhart Tolle called Creating a New Earth Together. This new series features a full curriculum plus 4 live teaching sessions with Eckhart that begin on May 14th. We've had many people already register for this online series, and many of these individuals have begun submitting their questions already on the theme of creating a new earth together. And we've combed through those questions and selected the questions that seem to have the most universal application specifically to this theme of awakening presence in times of adversity. And these are the questions that we'll see how many questions we get to that will be brought forward as part of this special webinar. As I mentioned, there are 4 live teaching series with Eckhart that are part of this new series on creating a new earth together. They begin on May 14th. And if you want to learn more about the series, if you're on the player page, you can simply click the Learn More button. You can go to eckharttolle.com, or if you're watching this streaming on YouTube, there's a link underneath the player in the YouTube description so you can learn more. And now it is a true, as I said, honor and delight to be able to bring forward on this topic that I know is so important to so many of us, awakening presence in times of adversity, Eckhart Tolle. Eckhart?
Thank you, Tammy. Welcome, everybody. Make sure you're as present as possible here and now, which means not losing yourself in useless thinking, but being aware of sense perceptions right now, visual, auditory, maybe other sense perceptions, aware of the present moment. Aware of being aware, which may sound a little strange to some of you when I say being aware that you are aware, but that's an amazing realization. I could use other words to point to this realization. For example, realizing that presence, that is the essence of who or what you are, that is a deeper meaning of the present moment. Present moment is the eternal presence. I'll give you one other pointer in the form of a little question. What does it feel like to be you? In other words, I'm inquiring about your sense of self or your sense of identity. What does it feel like to be you without any reference to your past or your future? So you let go of that. What's left when you don't remember yourself as the historical person? What is left of you when your past becomes unimportant? Let's imagine you don't have a past. And there's no future. There's just this. Do you still know who or what you are without any reference to memory? And that's a very profound question, which cannot be answered conceptually, can only be realized experientially. Because when I ask that, who are you without reference to your past? This awareness awakens in you. You realize that there is a presence, a vitally alive presence that is there, which in some spiritual traditions it's the I am. You realize that you are the being of you. And that is pure presence. That is the most essential spiritual realization. The realization that you are the being, awakening to that realization of being. All spiritual traditions, all spiritual practices point to that. Now, many humans are not yet ready for it. They are too immersed, too much in the grip of the conditioned mind, which is a kind of state of hypnosis. And here we come to adversity. Adversity is the great awakener. Adversity actually drives the evolution of consciousness anywhere in the universe. The evolution of consciousness would not happen if life forms, not just humans, if life forms did not encounter adversity. Adversity awakens you. As Carl Jung said, there's no coming to consciousness without pain. Without challenges, without adversity, you become even more unconscious. You go to sleep, so to speak. You need to be challenged. And then that generates, at first it generates suffering in many cases. And then there's a potential that it can generate more consciousness. I could talk about that for a few more hours, but let's start with the first question. I'm sure we'll be coming back to this again and again. So let's start with our first question.
Very good. We have Julia with us from Oxford, England.
Okay. Hello, Eckhart.
Hi, Julia.
Okay. Hi. This is my question. So when I think of a new Earth, part of what I imagine is humanity living in balance with the planet and nature. However, when I learn about the science of climate change and how far we're into ecological overshoot, as well as how fast changes need to be made, I fear that we're already past the point of no return, and many climate change experts believe this to be the case. Or, if we still have time, I worry that humanity is unable to evolve fast enough to prevent a sixth mass extinction. Thoughts about this often make me feel sad and take me out of presence. Can you provide any guidance? Thank you.
Thank you for the question. Adversity comes in two forms. Adversity comes to you personally. It means a challenge that you face as an individual or in your family. But those are personal challenges, and they're inevitable. They rise in everybody's life periodically. And then there are other types of challenges that are collective. That means difficult situations that arise and affect large groups of people, sometimes millions of people, or everybody on the planet at the same time. So there's adversity of a personal kind, and there's adversity of a collective kind affecting many human beings or other life forms at the same time. So when you talk about climate change, then the possibility of destruction happening in nature, that is certainly a collective challenge for humanity. And the question arises, is there anything we can do about it? There's a possibility of what are the possibilities of taking action? But more importantly, what is the underlying state of consciousness that is necessary for whatever action you take to be intelligent action, wise action, not action that, instead of solving anything, makes it even worse. So you're in any situation, any kind of challenge, the primary factor is your state of consciousness with which you approach it. So that is the foundation for anything that you may do. And of course, the foundation is presence, to be aware, so you don't lose yourself in egoic reactivity and then take actions motivated by egoic reactivity, which often are actions that are well-intentioned, but good intentions are not necessarily wise. As the old proverb goes, the road to hell is paved with good intentions. Good intentions without wisdom are counterproductive. So there are people with very good intentions. They go to a museum and throw tomato soup over a painting and believe that will help in their fight against global warming or raise consciousness. And I believe that would be an example of what the Buddhists would call unskillful action, that actually does not help the situation, but it makes you or your ego feel better, that you feel a bit virtuous. Or some people lie in the middle of the road to stop the traffic. Of course, that again, that makes your ego feel virtuous and you're actually doing something, but does it actually help raise consciousness on the planet? I don't believe it does. There are other actions that perhaps have some utility. There are the passive resistance towards the cutting down old growth forests. There's something to be said for certain types of passive resistance. The deforestation is linked to this challenge that we're talking about, but it's not just that. There's a whole range of things that humans are doing to the planet that are all destructive. Overfishing in the oceans, upsetting the whole ecological balance in the oceans. Just mentioned deforestation in the Amazon and other parts of the world. The use of pesticides that causing many life forms to become extinct. I've been reading it, even the population of bees is in many parts of the world is shrinking, so there are fewer bees pollinating the plants and all the chain reactions, all kinds of things. But there are other challenges also that they might even be more immediate. We don't know. All those challenges, such as nuclear war, could still happen. There's the definite possibility that there's so much unconsciousness still in all those people who are in politics, taking decisions that are egoically motivated, sometimes well-intentioned but misguided. So there are also challenges to do with the human consciousness that being affected by the digital addiction to digital devices, especially in young people, that's affecting their state of consciousness. That's a very, very serious challenge that's being perhaps still underestimated. That right now there are many young people that have grown up with these devices, have become addicted to these devices, who are almost incapable of forming personal relationships because their entire reality, or 90% of their reality, is digital reality. They spend hours every day on this. It's affecting their ability to focus on anything for any length of time. When human beings lose the ability to focus, they can no longer solve problems, because any problem solving requires a prolonged focusing of consciousness. It requires to be present with something and focus your attention on something. Many youngsters are losing that. Personal relationships cannot enter into meaningful personal relationships anymore. Have completely cut off from nature, because the entire reality becomes digital, and that affects their state of consciousness. And within 2 generations, it could mean the complete breakdown of civilization, when it can no longer be upheld. Human consciousness is no longer able to cope with problems that arise, and loses its creative power. So all these things are coming together. So there's a huge, we don't know which is the most serious challenge now. But they're all coming together, and that's very important realization, that we are facing this a kind of, to use a term from existentialist philosophy, it's a limit situation, or singularity, where many challenges are coming together, and humanity has reached this point now where when they look at the challenge, it seems it's impossible to solve them all. What can we do about it? There's only one solution, and that is a shift in human consciousness. Now, the questioner, Julia, is asking, is this going to happen fast enough? We don't know. The most important thing is, your first responsibility is your own state of consciousness, so that you don't lose yourself in egoic unconsciousness again. Stay as present as you can, and then see what action you can take if action is possible. But only then, when you are present, are you able to take action that is likely to be effective, rather than making the situation even worse, which is the case when you're not present and you become reactive and you take action arising out of fear or anger. And any action you take that arises out of fear or anger is likely to be unhelpful and, in many cases, counterproductive. As far as planet is concerned, and the possibility of mass extinction, there is, of course, that possibility that we are facing a sixth mass extinction. That apparently geologists tell us there have already been 5. It is possible that we are facing going into a sixth. My intuitive feeling is we have not arrived at that point yet. I don't exclude the possibility, but my intuitive feeling is we have not yet arrived at that point. Things are still possible to can turn around. But let's take the worst case scenario. Let's say that actually the 6th mass extinction of life on the planet has already started and it cannot be reversed. Now, let's look at the previous 5 mass extinctions. There have been 5. The last one, many people know about that, happened approximately 65 million years ago, which is when the dinosaurs and many other life forms very, very suddenly and quickly became extinct. Many, many other life forms also. And we're almost certain that it was caused by a meteorite hitting the planet and changing the climate totally. And so a significant proportion of life forms became extinct. That was the last mass extinctions. But that was number 5. There were already 5 other mass extinctions before that. I believe it's the first or the second one, very interesting thing. There were already rudimentary life forms on the planet. And then one life form, certain bacteria, through photosynthesis, started to generate a poisonous gas-like substance on the planet, which over a million years started filling the planet. And this gas was poisonous to many creatures, the rudimentary life forms on the planet. And that was the first or second, I remember, mass extinction, I believe about 450 million years ago. And this gas that filled the planet and killed off many life forms is still around. We call it oxygen. So then life forms grew up that actually used that gas for their to generate life and energy. Now we come to another interesting fact. After each mass extinction, life on the planet became greatly impoverished because 60, 70, 80% of life forms disappeared. And after each life extinction, life regenerated on the planet. It took a little while, a few million years, but life regenerated on the planet. And each time it regenerated, the life that came had greater complexity, the life forms in the previous life forms. Each time life regenerated on the planet, the complexity of life forms, the new life forms that arose, was greater. There was, in other words, there was a greater influx of consciousness. And so the planet, therefore, faced extreme adversity already 5 times and succumbed to this catastrophic event. And each time something happened because the life on the planet is not what you see on the surface with sensory perceptions. The essence of the life on the planet is not visible to the senses. The essence of the life on the planet is a conscious energy field and a vast intelligence, planetary intelligence that is an aspect of universal intelligence, the one consciousness out of which everything arises. And that one consciousness out of which everything arises has many strands and many rays of consciousness, so to speak. So there's planetary consciousness, which we are part of. And the consciousness, the the vast intelligence that incarnates into life forms can never be threatened. That is not subject to death. That vast intelligence, you cannot destroy it. That is beyond anything that could be destroyed. And that remains. So even if we had to face a mass extinction, life would regenerate on the planet. Whether humans would still be there, we don't know. It's quite possible that the consciousness of planet would incarnate into other, and consciousness would manifest through other life forms, but it would be the same consciousness manifesting through different life forms. So, as I said, my intuitive feeling is we have not yet reached that point, but worst case scenario, if we have reached that point, even then, there's nothing to be feared, because the essence of life is indestructible. The essence of all life is the one consciousness. The one consciousness, we could call it the soul of the world, as the ancient, in ancient Roman times, that expression, anima mundi, the soul of the world, the soul of the planet. The planet also has a soul. There's planetary intelligence, and that remains, and that will continuously regenerate, and it will incarnate, and gradually it evolves, and it evolves continuously. Where it's going, nobody knows, but it evolves. You can see it in yourself. Even you as an individual, you have already evolved to reach this point where what I'm saying to you is meaningful, and you realize the truth of it, you recognize it from within. That means you have already evolved, just as I have in just a single lifetime. And I know that I've only evolved through this consciousness, has evolved through adversity, through suffering. And then there was an awakening that happened through suffering. And the same happened on a grand scale on the planet. Suffering, adversity doesn't mean that all life to evolve, we need a mass extinction. All life forms encounter challenges. The moment they are born, they encounter challenges. And that's how consciousness develops. Look how a bird, how I often look out of the window here, and sometimes I see eagles circling overhead. Sometimes little birds sit in the trees, and they look at me, and I look at them. And there's an enormous alertness when the birds look at you. They go, extremely alert. Why are they so alert? They have survived through their alertness. And why do they need to be alert? Because if they were not alert, they would have been eaten up by all kinds of predators. And of course, some birds get eaten up by cats, so they're not quite alert enough, especially if they're very young. And then that is how the cats survived for a long time, through that. When the cat looks at a mouse hole, I've mentioned that in The Power of Now, the cat is totally alert, totally. It survives. Now, if the bird did not encounter this challenge, the alertness would decrease, and so there would be no evolution of consciousness evolving through the life form of a bird. I could talk about that for another 2 or 3 hours, but that's not necessary. It's just realizing the importance to actually welcome challenges, not lose ourselves in fear or anger or other egoically motivated reactive emotions, not lose ourselves, so that we find a place of peace where we realize the truth of there's this book called Course in Miracles, which is a spiritual course, which is good for some people, but not for everybody. But anyway, the Course in Miracles, which is at the beginning, this course can be summarized in the following words. Nothing real can be threatened. Nothing unreal exists. Herein lies the peace of God. And that's the ultimate truth. Nothing real can be threatened, because whatever you see here is only relatively real. It's not absolutely real. There's only one absolute reality, which is the life that underlies all forms of life. That is in you, that is everywhere, in every life form. There is a life, that is the consciousness that underlies all manifestations of life. So, and that when you realize that within yourself, then you're no longer fearful. And you're no longer fearful of the possibility of perhaps even a mass extinction or climate change. And you may be able to take some intelligent action, whatever is appropriate for you. You may be able to take some action. It could be through giving out information through all the devices that we have, or some practical action, but it probably will not be throwing tomato soup or a painting in a museum, or even lying in the middle of the road. It would be more intelligent action. The most important thing is to have that deep sense of inner connectedness when you realize that the truth of these words, that life itself is indestructible, because life itself is consciousness, and that is universal consciousness, and you are an expression of that. So do not fear, and continue to enjoy nature, love nature, respect nature, see the sacredness of nature. That's very important, that more and more human beings do it. It's not just a rational thing that we must not destroy nature. There's something deeper. When you become aware, you develop your ability to recognize the sacredness of nature. And that is what we need to regain. Ancient cultures had that to some extent. We need to regain the recognition of the sacredness of nature. And that can only come through awareness. So let's leave it at that. I hope it's a little bit helpful.
Thank you. Thank you.
Next, Eckhart, we have Miangela from the Netherlands.
Thank you. Hi, Eckhart. Thank you for this wonderful opportunity.
Hello, Miangela.
My question was, it seems that the cause of a lot of suffering for the humans is the existence of the egoic mind. So my question was, why did the ego or the egoic mind come to be during evolution of the humankind? What was its purpose intended to be? And do you see it as an evolutionary stepping stone in some way? And if so, how does it serve our collective evolution?
Thank you. Thank you. Very profound question. I know that some people see it as a mistake, that evolution went the wrong way, but that you can perhaps look at. I don't see that as a mistake. I believe it was, as you said, a kind of stepping stone. How did it all start? Well, I'd suggest it started with the arising of the ability to formulate conceptual thinking in human beings many thousands of years ago. There's more to human history than we actually know of, so who knows. But in the distant past, at some point, humans developed this incredible ability to think. Not just an animal has consciousness, it can respond to situations through consciousness, but the animal does not have what we call thinking. It's a different kind of consciousness, but it's not conceptual thought. Conceptual thought is very much related to the rising of language in humans. So the humans began to use language to communicate, to point things out, and so on. And gradually thinking became more pronounced, it became stronger, and then they could remember things, they could figure things out by thinking about them, and then gradually humans became the most powerful life form on the planet, and they became that not through physical strength, because there are many animals that are physically stronger, but through the power of thought. So they can figure things out. They can build a trap for even a bigger animal. They can figure things out beforehand. So thinking grew in humans, the ability to think, and thinking is a form that consciousness takes, and the ability to think grew and grew and grew and became stronger and stronger, and gradually human identity, which before was rooted unconsciously, instinctively in their being, as it still is with animals. You can see when an animal rests, for example. Let's say if you have a cat, and the cat rests completely. It rests in its own being. It is not plagued by thinking when it rests. Whereas many humans, when they rest in bed, they live in a state of crisis. Not because there's anything happening around them, but because their mind is creating a crisis situation, which is not happening at all. So perhaps before thinking arose in humans, humans also had the ability to rest in being. It's unconsciously, not as the realization of being. When you transcend the ego, we'll come to that in a minute. So the human sense of identity became increasingly related to thought activity, narratives in your mind. And then what happened is humans developed a mental a mentally constructed self that they had a relationship with. And that is the ego. It was a bundle of thought to do with your past, with your memories, things that happened to you, all your viewpoints, your opinions, or a bundle of thought that becomes you, conditioned thought, and that becomes the ego. And then humans have lost their connectedness with the being. They lost themselves in doing, because thinking is a kind of doing. However, thinking had incredible benefits, because thinking enabled humans to create civilization, all the ancient civilizations were created because humans were able to think, but they had not lost completely connectedness with being. If you lose completely your connectedness with being, even though you might have developed a high capacity for thinking, you can no longer create anything that could be called civilization, because you lose your creative power. And humans have arrived, or arriving at this point for millions of humans, they have lost their connectedness with being, and they're completely trapped in thinking, and derive their identity from the narrative in their mind. Because that's me, that's my life, So the ego was a wonderful thing in many ways that enabled humans to create, in conjunction with their connectedness with being. But now it has reached its final stages, and as it reaches its final stages, it becomes more and more destructive. When a metamorphosis needs to happen now, whereby humans transcend thinking, and one could compare it perhaps to before a butterfly is born, there's a caterpillar that crawls. And at some point in the life of the caterpillar, life becomes almost impossible. Life as a caterpillar doesn't work anymore. The lifespan, life as a caterpillar cannot survive anymore. And then something happens, and out of the caterpillar, a butterfly develops. And in a way, the ego is like that. We have come to the end of usefulness of the ego in evolutionary terms. And there's now not just the possibility of transcending the ego to a new state of consciousness, a state of presence, a state of awareness. It is not just a possibility, it's a necessity for humans. Why is it a necessity? It brings us back to adversity, because we've arrived at this point where we are faced with multiple problems, gigantic problems, by the way, most of them, if not all, created by the ego itself, the unconsciousness of the ego. All the gigantic problems that we face are actually externalizations of the dysfunctional ego in human consciousness. That is why Carl Jung said the greatest danger for humanity is not some external danger. The greatest danger lies within the human mind, which is, he called it mass psychosis, which means total dysfunction of the egoic consciousness, when it just creates havoc and suffering, because it has lost completely its connectedness with being, which we could call the spiritual dimension, which we could call the transcendent dimension. So modern humans, many of them, have little or no access anymore, and this is why they've come so unhappy. Why even so many youngsters already they're prescribed tranquilizers and antidepressants. Millions of people can't live without them. So these are all signs that humans have lost connectedness with the most important dimension of life, which is the spiritual dimension, which is the being. So we've arrived at this point. In your question then, in other words, in a way you already gave the answer when you asked the question, because you mentioned the word stepping stone. It was a kind of stepping stone, because now we either evolve to a new state of consciousness, or if we don't, then yes, probably we will self-destruct. So that's the point that we're at. It's a critical point, but that's a wonderful thing, because we have to reach this critical point, which for many people will mean they will encounter increasing adversity of a collective kind. But adversity potentially is the greatest awakener. And a growing number of humans actually now voluntarily, so to speak, undergo this shift in consciousness, as you are, otherwise you would not be listening to this. You perhaps have already had enough adversity that has taken you to this point where you can almost decide to awaken voluntarily rather than through extreme suffering. So the ego then has been a stepping stone. It's now time to transcend it. There have always been, in the history of humanity, there have always been certain individuals here and there, throughout all time period who were able to awaken to that dimension, but only a few individuals here and there. There was some, but now the possibility of awakening is there because we are faced with enormous crisis of a collective kind. So let's be thankful for that. These are very auspicious times because these are very difficult times. Thanks. Thank you.
Our next question, Eckhart, is from someone who submitted it in written form. This is from Anthony from Oakville, Ontario. And Anthony writes, one of the many passages in A New Earth that resonated deeply with me describes the primary purpose of our lives as awakening to the essential nature of who we are, with everything else being of secondary importance. You teach us that actualizing this primary purpose will result in the secondary things taking care of themselves in a natural and evolutionary way. Further, you've described various portals into presence designed to assist in this awakening. However, in the face of the often overwhelming onslaught of everyday life distractions and demands, I have found it very challenging to establish and maintain focus on this primary purpose of awakening to our essential nature, and to successfully incorporate the portals into presence into my everyday life. The desire and the intention are there, but they do not seem to be enough to rise above the surface manifestations of everyday life. From a practical point of view, how do I create the focus and awareness that's needed for this awakening? And even more importantly, how do I maintain it?
Oh, thank you. Long question. But perhaps the answer does not need to be that long, although my answers do tend to be long, as you might have noticed. It's true that all the things that surround you in your everyday life seem to demand your attention. They demand your attention. Say, give me attention. This is important. All kinds, one thing after another happening all around you, always pulling you out of yourself. And this has become amplified since the clever human mind came up with these devices. I have one here. These are the devices that amplify that factor. They constantly make a demand on your attention. And so it's not just the things of the world, things, but ultimately, when you look more deeply, what it really means, it all comes down to thought. That thoughts absorb your attention, because all these things are experienced through thinking. So you think about this little problem and this person and that situation and what might happen tomorrow or next year. Or you think about, oh yes, it comes another message. Somebody posted something on Facebook, and then you think about that, and then you think about some. So really, all the things demand your attention. If you look more deeply, it's all thought that continuously absorbs your attention completely. It absorbs your consciousness. So in other words, you're lost in thought. When you're lost in the world, you're really lost in thought, because you experience the world in your mind. And so you lose yourself in thought. And that is, the question is, are you able to get out of that, the gravitational pull, so to speak, of thought, and are you able to become present in order to do that, you need to know that you're lost in thought. There are many people who are so identified with thought that they don't even know that there's anything else is possible. But you know that something else is possible. So when you realize you're completely lost in thought, or you've been scrolling on these things for last half hour, 1 hour, completely uselessly, which is just amplifying thought. And then suddenly you go, oops, I'm lost in thought. And then you become present. And I've given certain portals into presence, things you can do, helpful things that can bring you into presence. Breathe consciously. Even a few times, thought thing begins to subside because you're breathing consciously. You're taking your attention away from thinking, and you're aware of your breathing. Or sense perceptions. You look out of the window, with trees, whatever it may be, and you give it attention, quiet attention. Or even in your room, you can take an object and feel its presence. Whatever it may be, you give attention to the present moment. Or you feel the inner body, you feel the aliveness, I call it inner body awareness. You feel the aliveness within the body, the animating presence in the body, in your hands, your feet, you feel that. And you can breathe and feel the inner body at the same time, and sense perception at the same time. You're becoming present. And then the very essence of presence, these were the portals into presence. Then the very essence of presence is to sense that presence within you, the awareness as yourself, which means for a moment, thinking has subsided and awareness has arisen. That is a shift in consciousness. Thinking has subsided, but you have not fallen to sleep. You haven't become unconscious. In fact, you're very conscious, but aware instead of thinking. And so when then after a while, you notice the qualitative difference, so to speak, between the thinking state and the aware state, so that you want to go to the aware state more often. And you're not seduced so much by all the thoughts that continuously demand your attention. It may be helpful to have little pointers that you put in various places in where you live, in your bedroom, your bathroom, your living room, or your office. Little pointers that tell you to be present, whatever it may be. You can choose some. And you may have to change them occasionally, because after a while, you get used to something, to a little pointer, and then it doesn't work anymore. Then you have to choose a different pointer. It could be a little, whatever, an object, a drawing, something that, it tells you, be present. So it's but you need to have reached a certain degree of awareness for even the choice to be there in you. If you have that choice, it means that there's already that degree of awareness there that enables you to have that choice. Now, the alternative is, if you are unable to do that, what life will do, life will give you adversity. And then it will push you into presence. You'll experience, first, of course, it may push you into suffering, but then potentially you become present through the adversity. You might get a health challenge. You might lose something, or somebody close to you dies, or you lose all your money, or something goes very wrong somewhere. Relationship breaks up. All kinds of things that experience that would usually cause you suffering, but potentially can push you into presence. Many people have come to me over the years and they've said, if I had not had this serious life-threatening illness, I would never have understood what you're talking about. That broke up my ego. That cracked open my ego. Or they say, if I had not gone through this horrible, lost my job and my marriage broke up, if I had not gone through those terrible situations, I would never have understood what you're talking about, because those situations caused a crack in the shell of the ego. The ego is a little bit like, an analogy, you can almost say it's a seed. You can imagine it as a seed, and for the seed eventually needs to die for the plant to come out of it. The seed needs to die, and the seed dies at some point when its lifespan as the seed has come to an end. It's not working anymore. So choose presence. Don't wait for adversity to arise to force you into presence, but if that is the case, then use it. So that's my advice to you.
Would you like one more question,
yes, please.
Eckhart? Okay,
Yes, I'd love one more.
We'll make this the final question. We have Paul here with us from Thailand.
Hi, Paul.
Hello, Eckhart. Thank you.
Thank you.
So I've worked in IT for many years. A concern that I sense, particularly with regards to the rising of the new Earth, is the rapid growth of AI and the plan for where that's leading to. Ray Kurzweil famously predicted that computers would reach human level intelligence by 2029, and that we would merge with computers and become superhuman around 2045. He also said that AI will take over more and more human thought until human thought is eventually negligible. So you might think, okay, well, I won't get Elon Musk's neural link chip in the head, but actually the chip in the head is just the start. Elon let it slip that they will be able to make the brain connection via technology injected into the bloodstream. But anyway, leaving that aside, the concern is that having predominantly digital AI-controlled thoughts rather than the naturally occurring human thought patterns may quash the arising of the new consciousness. So I know you have concerns generally around the misuse of technology, but I'm keen to get your thoughts around the rise of AI and the possible takeover of human thinking.
Right, thank you. Yes, well, that's it's amazing how fast it has developed just in the past few years. It is quite possible that, or likely, that AI is quickly becoming better at thinking than human beings. But that may be quite significant, because that takes us back to what we've been talking about. Human beings have reached this state in the evolution of their consciousness where they need to transcend the ego. But the ego is based on thought plus emotion, but thought is the essence of ego. We are here to transcend thinking. What is arising is a new dimension of consciousness in humans, which we could call awareness. Awareness is still able to use thinking, but it transcends thinking. There is an intelligence in awareness that is higher, we could say, than thinking. And it may be a significant time that just as we have arrived, as humans have reached this point where they are not just able to, but need to transcend thinking because they have been trapped in thinking for a very long time, which means in their ego. They have been possessed by thinking. They have been used by thinking rather than using thought. They have been used by thought, almost like in many humans, thought almost is like a parasitic entity that absorbs all their attention continuously and pretends to be them. They mistake it for who or what they are. So they live with this parasitic entity, which is the incessant, involuntary stream of thinking. Not constructive thinking, but the incessant involuntary thinking that they are completely identified with. We need to go transcend that. We have reached this evolutionary point where we are not just able to, but need to transcend it. And now perhaps AI, we have developed this artificial intelligence that is actually becoming better at thinking than we could ever be, just at the point where anyway, we are transcending thinking as humans. So we can then relegate thinking, perhaps a lot of it, to AI. I have not yet encountered, I don't know if it ever will happen, I have not yet encountered anything, or it could happen, I don't know. I have not encountered anything produced by AI that is truly creative, like a great work of art, or a great work of music, a great work of literature, or some totally original insight into the nature of the structure of matter, the universe, some invention, some totally new invention that nobody had ever thought of before, and suddenly this totally new thing comes into this world. I have not yet found anything truly creative in AI. AI uses all the things that it knows from human thought and can sometimes put it together much better than humans could. But it has, I don't know whether AI will ever be truly creative. So that could well be the limitation of AI. Could be extremely good at using already existing knowledge, but may not be able to come up with anything totally new and creative. But it's just, whatever it may be, whatever AI does, AI also is a manifestation of consciousness that takes the form of thought. Just everything is consciousness. Human thought is consciousness has taken the form of thought. And when AI thinks, it's also consciousness. So it's an interesting question. As I often mention, and there's other, not mainstream science, but some scientists also are going that way. I would, for example, suggest that human consciousness is not produced by the brain. Human consciousness, the brain is a conduit for consciousness in the same way that a radio is a conduit for whatever it receives, and then it plays the music. The music comes out of the radio, but is not produced by the radio. The radio receives that. And so obviously there's a correlation between the human brain and consciousness, but I do not believe, and at some point we may realize that even through science, that the consciousness is not produced by the brain, although the brain is necessary for consciousness to manifest in this particular form through humans. When the brain becomes defective, then you don't remember things anymore, you can't talk anymore, perhaps you can't think anymore. In the same way that if the radio becomes rusty and defective, the music it plays will become defective also, and at some point it will stop playing. It cannot play the music anymore. So if the brain is a kind of conduit of consciousness, perhaps if AI, I'm just playing with these ideas, if AI reaches to a sufficient degree of complexity, AI could also become a conduit of consciousness. That's quite possible. But so there's nothing that is not consciousness. So AI is just another manifestation of consciousness. I believe it may have certain inherent limitations, but I'm not sure of that. Nobody knows. It may have certain limitations, so it may not be able to access what we call awareness, self-awareness, perhaps, but I don't believe it. So far, as I said, I have not seen it accessing the dimension that gives rise to true creativity, or what we could call wisdom, or true creativity. We'll have to see. Nobody knows what exactly is how this is going to develop. But the important thing is to realize whatever it is, it's another form that consciousness takes. Because consciousness, and humans have kind of created it. Consciousness has created the human brain, and now the consciousness through the human brain has created artificial intelligence. It's still consciousness creating these things. I think we need to, you as an individual, you need to be careful that you don't lose yourself in this. That's always the danger. Stay present. Don't lose yourself in these things. Don't lose yourself in your devices. Don't lose yourself in artificial intelligence. And I just saw the other day that more and more people have AI companions, and they communicate with their companion. They have a certain form. They see looks like a real person, and then they can send text messages and receive text messages, and then they can talk to them too. AI looks like, and they prefer that to real human relationship because it's less problematic. And so you need to be careful that again, awareness is your protection against losing yourself in these powerful things that may turn out to be destructive in the end. We don't know yet. They could well be quite destructive. And so you need powerful presence and awareness so that you don't get addicted to it, you don't lose yourself in it. It may well be, I can foresee in the future that groups of humans who perhaps completely reject these things, and they will live without them. And others perhaps lose themselves in them. We could also reach another crisis point out of the many possible crisis points that we can reach is when more and more humans lose themselves in the digital world. I've already mentioned that earlier. Very dangerous. So we are faced with incredible challenges all around us of different kinds. It's never been quite like that before. And you really need to be aware of that power that is within you, that is presence, that is awareness, that is the transcendent dimension, that is the spiritual dimension. If without that you will be lost, especially now. You will be overcome by all kinds of challenges. So it's vitally important to stay present as much as you can. Maybe have a meditation practice. Be aware. Attention back to the present moment. Your breathing, your inner body awareness. Become aware of presence, awareness, so that thinking becomes secondary. And you can still use thinking, or you can think maybe I will do most of the thinking for you, and you dwell in awareness, which is a higher intelligence than thinking. So that's the key, and that's our challenge. Thank you.
Eckhart, as we conclude, I wonder, would you be willing just to lead us together in a few moments of presence to conclude this session?
Yes, thank you, Tammy. Be aware, first of all, of what you're seeing, which is this person on the screen. Be aware of your surroundings, also peripherally aware. Be aware of what you're hearing. Be aware that you're not really thinking right now because you don't need to. Be aware that you're breathing. Be aware that right now there's stillness inside you. There's a stillness. Stillness means you're not thinking, but you're just present. The most precious thing in your life is to find that realm of stillness that's always there, but often covered up by mental noise. Stillness is always there. The moment thinking subsides, you're still, but you're present. Now become aware that you are present, that you are aware. You know that you are. So you can say, I am, and that's all you need to say. And then you drop that also. And then you can sense the beingness of you. And that is the essence of you. The essence of you is that. That's why I wrote in that little book that I wrote, Stillness Speaks, the first sentence is, you're never more fully yourself than when you are still. And when you're still, you're not, your age becomes irrelevant. Your entire personal history becomes irrelevant. Whatever you may have achieved in life or failed at becomes irrelevant. Your race becomes irrelevant. Your gender becomes irrelevant, because that stillness is beyond all that. Who you essentially are is beyond all that. In your deepest essence, you are that. And that is what, in ancient traditions, in Buddhism, they call it, it's your Buddha nature, you are that. In esoteric Christianity, that is the Christ within you. Or in Hinduism, that is the Atman, the indwelling divinity. That is the essence. That is so simple. So simple. The rest is complicated. But that essence is utter simplicity. And that's your liberation. That's your liberation. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Eckhart. And this concludes our special webinar on awakening presence in times of adversity. As I mentioned at the very beginning, this leads into an online offering called Creating a New Earth Together that begins on May 14th. We'd love to have you join us. You can learn more at eckharttolle.com. Thank you, friends.